welcome to the California Book Club and to what's going to be, I think, a really wonderful and exciting conversation with Maxine Hong Kingston about her magnificent, miraculous first book, The Woman Warrior. I'm David L. Yulin. I'm the books editor of Alta Journal. We're going to start the conversation in a moment, but first we have a few things we want to, just a little bit of housekeeping to get ourselves set up and underway. I'd like to welcome you to the California Book Club and to Alta Journal. California Book Club is a monthly discussion of works of California literature. This is actually our first anniversary tonight. We launched last October 2020 in the midst of the lockdown, and we are now about to begin our second year. And I couldn't think of a better, more suited writer than Maxine Hong Kingston for us to start it up with. I want to introduce our partners. I'll name them quickly, and then we'll move to a couple of other things, and we'll get going. We are partnering on the California Book Club, as always, with Book Passage, Books Inc., Book Soup, Bookshop, Diesel, a bookstore, the Huntington USC Institute on California and the West, the Los Angeles Public Library, the San Francisco Public Library, Narrative Magazine, Vroman's Bookstore, and Zizova. We will have a sale. We do have a sale I want to introduce for California Book Club members. For just $50, you can get a year of Alta Journal. You can get this California Book Club tote bag, which I'm actually going to be traveling with this weekend because of its multiple pockets, perfect for carry-on. And one of our upcoming California Book Club books, those include Tommy Orange's There, and Hector Tobar's The Barbarian Nurseries. Take a look and, and please consider that. Watch tomorrow's thank you email for a link to this deal. Also, after the event tonight, if you want to keep the conversation going, please visit the California Book Club Clubhouse. This is a space for book club members to dig further into The Woman Warrior, share questions, discuss the conversation this evening, and upcoming California Book Club books. You'll find links to the sign up for the clubhouse in the comment section and in tomorrow's email. Before I turn it over to my colleague, John Freeman, I just want to say I'm really excited about this. I've read and taught the Woman Warrior a dozen times or more over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I consider it to be a real touchstone work of memoir and cross-genre and genre blurring. It's a wonderful piece of work on so many levels. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. John, I'm going to turn it over to you. John Freeman, the host of the California Book Club.
Hi there. Thank you so much, David. Really lovely to see your face, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you're like me, at some point, Homer made a lot more sense when I realized that Homer wasn't just a person, but perhaps a concept. As in that all the stories and the legends and the sort of fabulous images and the poetry that was in the Odyssey could have come from one person and then been refined over the years as that story was told and retold and refined by a series of bards who traveled around and told it aloud to other people. I used to think that was perhaps just the best way to tell a story, for a story to be passed from one person to the next. But every now and then it feels like a series of stories land into one person, into one body. And I would suggest that The Woman Warrior is one of those moments. It is quite simply a gorgeous, groundbreaking book full of stories. It's a memoir. It's a female Avenger story. It's a story about storytelling. And it is a series of reckonings with the stories that Maxine Hong Kingston grew up with in Stockton, California, in the 1940s and 50s, and going to Berkeley in the 1960s. It's a series of reckonings with how she was supposed to be good about the stories and silences that they came with. And this book has been such a gateway to other writers, not just Asian Americans. She's gifted writers with a form, a way to explode silences, a series of metaphors and how to deal with ghosts, a kind of inspiring warrior posture in which vengeance was sculpted not as destruction, but as restorative creation. Because through a series of fabulous examples of how to imagine the unknown, she showed what lurks in secrets and occlusions, and told the not told stories of immigrant life, and contextualizing these within the stories that were in fact told. She created a prismatic book about being Chinese American. And she demonstrated the groundbreaking comfort that comes from dealing with this along a fluidity of gender. Something she carried forward in this book's twin, Chinamen, which is a series of stories as told by the same narrator, only older, and in which that narrator imagines a similar but different series of stories from the past and a man's perspective. Chinamen won the National Book Award in 1981. These books were conceived, Maxine Hong Kingston has written, as a whole, and they've been periodically reunited, once in a box set and once in a modern library edition of the two books. This joinery isn't just publishing faffery over the value of great books. It's part of an homage to the ongoing pursuit that Maxine Hong Kingston has basically undergone in her entire life, which is to carry forward the stories of the past and to follow the adventures of her various narrators and their hauntings and their curses, and to deal with the frightening legacy of suicide and erasure that keeps pushing forth in various forms of hers. As I mentioned, she was born in Stockton. Her parents were a teacher and a doctor. She went to Berkeley. She taught school in Hayward. And then she moved to Hawaii, where she wrote this incredible book. Her other books include Tripmaster Monkey, which is a great California novel, I think, a novel whose character is based on Sun Wukong and whose main character, Whitman Ah Sing, is named after Walt Whitman, and whose exploits during the 1960s San Francisco we hear about, and his attitude towards changing, his attitude about his Chinese American heritage changes over time. She's also written a fifth book of Peace, which is Tripmaster's sequel, and the story of the fire that took the earlier version of that book. To Be a Poet, which is a lecture in which she realizes that among a life of transformations, her final transformation is to being a poet, a sort of manual for how to find poetry in life. She's also the author of I Love a Broad Margin in Life, a memoir in verse, and she's the editor of an anthology, Veterans of War, Veterans for Peace. She's won a National Humanities Medal, a Medal for Distinguished Contribution to Letters, a National Medal for the Arts given by President Barack Obama, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Asian American Literary Awards. And what's clear from this body of work, which is stretching now at this point across almost 6 decades, is that Maxine Hong Kingston's work is one long book, a labor, but also a transformation. Let's start off where it all began. In 1970s Hawaii, in a hotel room, I think, with this extraordinary journey of the woman warrior coming to life. Please join me in welcoming Maxine Hong Kingston. Hello, Maxine. I think you need to unmute.
Thank you, John. That was such a wonderful introduction. I feel appreciated and I feel understood. So thank you.
That's a slightly comical way to begin. Maxine, you have to unmute because as anyone who's read this gorgeous book knows, that is sort of the challenge of this book, isn't it?
Yes, I'm always working on how not to be silent. Yes. And it's a story about bullying people into talking.
You know, your forms of silence that you're dealing with here are many, and I want to talk about them over the course of this hour, which we're going to share with your good friend, the novelist James Janko, who's going to come in about 20 minutes. But you know, because books that are going on 50 years old can seem inevitable, I wonder if you could do what you do in this book, which is to take us back in time to another reality and imagine yourself into the life of the person who wrote this book. And maybe tell us a little bit about what you were thinking at the time, where you were, and perhaps some of the things that you knew you might have to do in order to get this book off your chest.
And another reality. I think it's all the same reality. Isn't there just one reality? Let me see. I have been writing ever since I was a child, and and as a child, I would often think, where is this coming from? And at one point, I was very sure that I've been a writer for 3 incarnations, and all the time uh, 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 trying to put into words reality, and the reality of dreams, the reality of imagination, but also the reality of this material world, and the reality of all of the people. At one point, I thought, if every person on this earth has a story, and I want to write every single one of them. And okay, but I did not know these stories in The Woman Warrior. Um, there was a day when my husband and Earl and I, we decided to go to Lanai on the tiny little nothing island, and we had been we'd been living at a boarding school with all the children, and being like in loco parentes for all of them, as well as teaching. And so let's just go to a nowhere place. And so we went to Lanai, and there was a 10-room hotel, and the bowling alley was broken. The bulb on the projection machine was broken at the movie house, and so there was nothing to do. And then for some reason, I just felt like something was coming, and so I got the little table and turned it away from the window, away from the beautiful view of the ocean and Hawaii, and I turned it toward the wall, and I didn't have any paper, so I got an envelope. There was just an envelope, and I just started listing scenes, powerful scenes of feeling, and to commit suicide, the woman stoned to death because they thought that she was a Japanese spy, a woman stoned to death. I just made a list of, the time that I bullied the girl. I made a list, and it felt to me like each one was a story, each one was a scene, each one full of feeling. And so I came out with, I guess, an outline for The Woman Warrior.
My God, what an amazing lightning field existed near that bowling alley. The book begins with your mother speaking, and it ends with you speaking, and I suspect that's on purpose, to some degree. Your mother doing what you describe and later explain as talking story. And for those in the audience who perhaps haven't read this book, I envy you your experience coming. Can you say a little bit about what Talk Story was and how you just turned it from a practice, an experience, into a literary form?
Well, the Talk Story is a literal translation of Gong Gu Jai, and that, and it is a a great long tradition, probably going back not just to ancient China, but all the way back to Homer, when people, they did not write the stories, they told them, and long epics. And I was, in my mind, it's Gongwujai, and in Hawaii that I found the translation. It is an everyday word in Hawaii. Talk story, you know, kids get together, we're going to talk story. I I saw on television, there was some news, there was this guy who got arrested for something, and they were interviewing a cop. Well, is he under arrest? No, we just brought him in to talk story. And I thought, wow, there's my translation. And so that's how I got the words. They're not mine. I didn't make it up. They come from another language, and they also come from Hawaii.
This book is full of radical freedoms. You enter the life of a legendary figure who saves her village by going into battle disguised as a boy. You enter the mind and experience of your aunt when she comes from China to visit your mother, her sister. You enter into periods of transformation. And I wonder, to some degree, how much of those freedoms come from your mother, because in the beginning, she's telling you, do not tell this story. You must not, and yet she's telling you. She's breaking the secret herself. And I wonder if there's a kind of paradox in that opening.
Oh yeah. There is that, but there's also what she said was, don't tell anyone what I am about to tell you. And I have noticed that it's not just me. Alice Walker begins The Color Purple, something like, I can't tell anyone but you, God. And Toni Morrison, it was either Sula or The Bluest Eye, where she says, quiet as it's kept, comma, and then she blabs everything. And it's the writer trying to break through silence, breaking through taboos, and then somehow the whole book has to do with breaking out of silence, and then also finding the voice.
If you can read a little bit from the book now, so we can hear one of its many voices. The pleasure of the book being that it is a voice with many voices within it, and that you've found a form to do that.
Okay, so what I'm going to read are the last two paragraphs of the book. And, you know, the title, The Woman Warrior, it's been a disappointment to me, because I've been trying to find the way to peace and to being a pacifist. And it's also a disappointment to me that Fa Mulan, I feel that I brought her here to the West, and now she's, everybody knows about her, but she is a warrior. She's a soldier. She's a killer, and I would rather this other woman be a hero. And so this is Sa Yin, and she is among the barbarians. The barbarians were primitives. They gathered inedible reeds when they camped along rivers and dried them in the sun. They dried the reeds tied on their flagpoles and horses' manes and tails. Then they cut wedges and holes. They slipped feathers and arrow shafts into the shorter reeds, which became knock whistles. During battle, the arrows whistled, high whirling whistles that suddenly stopped when the arrows hit true. Even when the barbarians missed, they terrified their enemies by filling the air with death sounds, which Cyan had thought was their only music. Until one night she heard music tremble and rise like desert wind. She walked out of her tent and saw hundreds of the barbarians sitting upon the sand gold under the moon. Their elbows were raised and they were blowing on flutes. They reached again and again for a high note, yearning toward a high note, which they found at last and held an icicle in the desert. The music disturbed Cyan. Its sharpness and its cold made her ache. It disturbed her so that she could not concentrate on her own thoughts. Night after night, the songs filled the desert, no matter how many dunes away she walked. She hid in her tent, but could not sleep through the sound. Then, out of her tent, which was apart from the others, the barbarians heard a woman's voice singing, as if to her babies, a song so high and clear it matched the flutes. Cyan sang about China and her family there. Her words seemed to be Chinese, but the barbarians understood their sadness and anger. Sometimes they thought they could catch barbarian phrases about forever wandering. Her children did not laugh, but eventually sang along when they left her tent to sit by the winter campfires ringed by barbarians. After 12 years among the southern Sunu, Cyan was ransomed and married to Tongsu so that her father would have Han descendants. She brought her songs back from the savage lands, and one of the three that has been passed down to us is 18 stanzas for a barbarian reed pipe, a song that Chinese sing to their own instruments. It translated well. Why I want people to remember this woman warrior is that she came back from war with music. Also, they could change the arrows into flutes. Okay, so they made flutes into arrows, but they could also change arrows into flutes. In a way, I thought I made this up, but then we were in China, in Xi'an, and I found an old dusty museum, and I actually found these flute whistles. Another thing that I'm dissatisfied with that I did not tell that the reason that she came back, to her people was that she founded a library, and I left that out. Okay, another dissatisfaction I have with the woman warrior is I didn't say that Famuklan was a weaver. And so I want to read you a correction. And I also was dissatisfied with myself because I took a lot of liberties and freedoms, and I changed the stories. And at one point I wanted to tell everybody, this is the real true translation, as good as I can get about the original chant of Famuklan. And the chant starts with the sounds chick, 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 chick. And that is the sound of the shuttle going back and forth across the loom. And the word jik means to weave, and it also means to knit, and it means to heal. Chick, 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 chick. Famuklan is weaving the shuttle through the loom when news of the draft comes. Each family must provide one man to be a soldier in the army. Sparing her dear father the wretched life of a soldier, she disguises herself as a man and goes in his stead to war. With a horse, heavy armor, and her hand-fitting sword, she fights wars. She is away long years and many battles, so long a time that her father and mother grow old and die. At the head of her army, giving chase and being chased, she suffers wounds. Blood drips red from the openings of her armor. Her army, chasing and being chased, passes her home village 6 times, back and forth past her home. But she cannot stop to place offerings on the graves. She wins in terrible battle. The king proffers reward. Famuklan asks to return home. She leads her army to her home village and orders them to wait for her in the square. Indoors, she takes off man's armor. She bathes, dresses herself in pretty silks, and reddens her cheeks and lips. She upsweeps her long black hair and adorns it with flowers. Presenting herself to the army, she says, "I was the general who led you. Now go home." By her voice, the men recognize their general, a beautiful woman. "You were our general?" "A woman. Our general was a woman, a beautiful woman. A woman had led us through the war. A woman has led us home." Famuklan disbands the army. Return home. Farewell. Beholding and becoming yin the feminine, come home from war. Chick, 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 chick. One very important thing that I found, that I learned, that I was so happy that I found, it says that she spared her father the wretched life of a soldier. A soldier's life is wretched. It's not heroic. And that I wrote the woman warrior as a heroic feminist story, and this brings me back to the original good idea, which is the life of the warrior is wretched.
Thank you so much for reading that correction and that poem to us. It is one of the powers of the book is to conceive of the warrior as a pacifist. And peace has been a everlasting value for you over the last 5 years. You've been arrested in its name. You've put together anthologies in its name. And I'd like to bring on your friend, the novelist James Janko, because he could speak to some of the things we've just been talking about, that you've been reading about. He's the author of The Clubhouse Thief and The Boy in Geronimo, which won the Northern California Book Award, but he was also a medic in Vietnam and refused to fire his weapon. And in addition to that, won a Bronze Star for his valor. James, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. So good to be with you. Thanks for the intro. Dear Maxine, known you a long time, but you know, I actually knew your writing before I met you in '93. I read The Woman Warrior on Alcatraz Island. I was a night watchman out there. The tourists had the place in the day, and at night there was a lone watchman, and that was me. So what a great place to read The Woman Warrior, a girlhood among ghosts. But I want to start, there's a sentence from Chinaman that I think goes to the heart of all of your books. And I've always seen you as a poet. This also goes to the heart of how you've lived your life. Here's the sentence. It's a perfect, true poem. Men build bridges and streets when there is already an amazing gold electric ring connecting every living being as surely as if we held hands, flippers and paws, feelers and wings. That goes to the heart, I think, of all of your work, all of it. Now, The Woman Warrior, on any page of it, I could find a poem. I could pull out a sentence and I could read you a poem. Probably some of the pages, probably several. I could do that with all your books. But besides my love of language and poetry, I love your mischief, because that's a thread for all your books as well. I'm going to just read this really brief passage. This is when your mom is a doctor, okay? And she's describing her practice. She says, you're describing her practice. When my mother went doctoring in the villages, the ghosts, the were people, the apes dropped out of trees. They rose out of Bridgewater. My mother saw them come out of cervixes. Medical science does not seal the earth, whose nether creatures seep out hair by hair, disguised like the smoke that dispels them. So she goes, she's on and on. Your mother tells of her stories. And at the end of this passage, this is the mischief that I really admire. Before we can leave our parents, they stuff our heads like the suitcases which they jam-pack with homemade underwear. And the question I have for you, in the Veterans Writers Group, which you've led since '93, which is still going, one of the first sessions you mentioned to us that in the act of writing, we change. Whether we're writing a story, a poem, an essay, a book, the actual act of writing changes us. And so the question is, The Woman Warrior came out in '76, and now, some 45 years later, after its publication, this book still speaks to us, and I think it changes whoever reads it. So then the question, how did writing The Woman Warrior change you? Does the world change as you write it?
Jimmy, that is my hope. That is, when I am teaching writing, that is a promise that I make to writers, that surely if you can face if you can face tragedies in your life and get through that form of storytelling, then and you have antagonists, and they meet and they fight it out, and then you come to a denouement. You come to, there is resolution, there is finding a meaning in understanding, and I'm always hoping for that happy ending, and surely going through that, not just finding the words, but there are the emotions. Oh, another important thing, point of view, to find the point of view, to write from the inside of people that you're mad at, from the inside of the enemies. all of that is a spiritual, a psychological exercise. And yes, I do find that I change, and then what you said about we do hope that when readers put themselves through that reading, I do hope that they change too. But there was another. Did you? What was your question again? Was it how's it change me? What did you say?
Yeah. How did yeah, how did it change you writing the book? And now it's so long, 45 years, and volumes have been written about it.
Yeah.
And so there's the writing of the book, there's the response of the book, edging up on half a century. And how does that change you? I'm gonna leave that question. I want John to come back in. And
Okay.
but
I have to think about that anyway, because I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, see you later.
Okay.
James, we're going to bring you back at some point. It is a potent question to ask with a transformative book that is, if you can see the comment queue here, Maxine, there are so many people telling you that your book, made them feel seen. It changed their lives. They picked it up in libraries, but it also reflects back on you. And I had a question that I wanted to ask, because James is right. Every page of this book is full of poetry, and one of the lines that really stuck with me on this must be I'm not like David, but this is my 5th time through the book. And Famulan, at some point, she's about to leave home, and she says she's not worried about coming home because she said her family had written their names and address on me. I would come back, because her back is completely written in their stories. And there's something in this book where language is not just a story. It's not just in the air. It's actually written on the body. The body is written by language. And I wonder if you can just talk about that as a concept, that the body is made by language, and how does that affect the way you conceive of story if it's not a ethereal thing, but it's a transmitting of what the body already is?
I must say, I haven't thought about it in the way you've spoken about it, but what I have thought is that imagination and imagination put into an artistic form, that we create reality. That if I can write about a peaceful person, for example, then maybe I can put that idea out there that that a pacifist is possible, and then we can live that way. We can live out our ideas and put it out into the real world. But those 2 passages that you and Jimmy read, I don't remember writing them, and but I do remember my mother constantly chanting the way back to our villages, the name of our tiny little village, the name of its county, the name of each province, and all the way home. She would say it over and over again. And I try to find those places on maps. They are so small, they are not on maps. And I have felt lost for a long time. Also guilty that I could not find my way back to those villages. So in answer to Jimmy's question, I have thought about, so I have some mighty dreams and nightmares and imaginations. And if I could just write them down, if I could write them down and get it, then will I be free of those nightmares? The answer is no. They still kept coming back, but they might take a different form from the way I wrote them, but they still keep coming back. And so I have thought that writing The Woman Warrior did not change me enough. So I need to write another one. So I just did it. So I did another one. And that wasn't enough. And so I did another one. Yeah.
Are you still visited in any way by ghosts?
Not so much as before. I think I must have spent at least, I don't know, 10 years of my childhood just scared. So scared of ghosts and sudden appearances and magic and for a long while, vampires. Vampires were the scariest. Lately I have not been. And I read that communist book on how not to be afraid of ghosts. So I read that, and I think I am becoming I started to major in engineering when I was in college, and I think I am becoming a realist, and I am more affected by the news and by what's going on, and so I am more of a realist. And then and there are ghosts, but they don't scare me as much.
There's a comment in the question box from a teacher who said, "I've read The Woman Warrior many times, and I don't only love the book, I'm inspired by it. When I was an English teacher, this is one of the books I used for students. It's layered and stunning." And the commenter says she's deeply respects and admires you for what you bring to the world. I wonder if you can talk about, the way that this book approaches storytelling and why it has been such a gateway for younger readers. I mean, you just mentioned being a realist. Why is it that at a certain age we're willing to listen to ghosts? We're afraid in that way. Is it because we're closer to the period when those ghosts are sort of poured into our ear, as you described with your mother, or that we're nearer to being a kind of creature or animal that over time we forget?
We haven't learned a reason yet. We don't know about logic. We haven't learned the scientific method. And so at the beginning, whatever comes in, you hear funny noises, and you have no explanation, and so you make this up. I think that what human beings enjoy, of all the genres and what we really enjoy are ghost stories, and we have all kinds of feelings, pity and terror, ghost stories, and ghost stories, not written down ghost stories, but for people to tell one another's ghost stories. That is so thrilling and so wonderful. And so that is that is my upbringing, and I think for most of us, for all of us, and then later on, we learn other genres or we try different things, but that is the beginning, the ghost stories.
The 70s, when you were writing this book, were such a great period for American literature. Toni Morrison debuted in the decade, Alice Walker, Toni Cade Bambara, Black Arts was really moving. Your books came out, and it seems like just among some of the writers you mentioned, you were all fed by feminism's push for new ideas and for acknowledgements and for human rights, the basic human rights that feminism demands. And I wonder how, if you could reflect on how that changed literary methods in the time period, away from realism towards something perhaps bolder.
Toni Morrison, whom I traveled with in China, Toni Morrison has said that she is writing the books that she wants to read. She's writing the books that are not out there. I had that feeling also, that there are, I have stories, I have feelings and experiences that have never been written about, and then I had to figure out a way how to do it. And also, I was trying to write the stories and also the voices that I was hearing, and they would be in another language or they would be in dialect and accent, and how do I do that? And also, I have no role models ahead of me, and so I just thought, okay, I will write however it comes to me, and I saw it as, I would write sounds, fragment sentences, Chinese sounds, and it wasn't like anything, and then and there was a point where I thought, this is not publishable. So, but I'll do it anyway and see what happens. It's, in a way, it's not even like taking chances. It's just like doing whatever comes, and we'll see what happens.
There's a question from the audience, someone named Dawn Dorland, and she asks, do you have an ear for the voices that are in The Woman Warrior, or did you have to sort of work to revise them to get them to sound the way that you sounded in your head? And how did you convey their sort of orality on the page? Did you have certain techniques that you adopted?
Yes, I do hear the voices, and then of course you can't remember all of it, and so there is trying to translate into words, and One way is, 20 drafts, trying to get it right. And okay, this is what I did, and this is what I recommend to everybody. You read it aloud. You read it aloud so that when you read aloud, it's using the whole body and your mouth and your breath, your tongue, and also you hear it. And reading aloud takes me to being able to get those voices right.
There's some extraordinary details in this book. The book is in 5 parts, as we've sort of mentioned. And the first one is your mother talk stories, talking about this aunt of yours who it winds up pregnant. You suspect it's from a rape or an assault, but you don't know. And the aunt kills herself. And then we go into the second part of the book, which is the legend of Fa Mulan, who disguises herself as a warrior and goes off to battle and rescues her village, and with the stories of her family tattooed on her back. And the third chapter is your mother's story, roughly, and her journey to the United States. The fourth book is, to some degree, your aunt's story, and the fifth is yours, is you unstopping your own breath, as well as, to some degree, the bullied classmate who you make speak, and then you choose another warrior. But across this whole book, you are kind of to some degree, the uber warrior yourself in storytelling. And I can't help but think that you're rescuing certain details from oblivion. Your mother, you describe buying a child slave, who's a girl, and you break down the prices of the slaves, and babies were free. And it feels like one thing you're doing as a feminist writer is claiming across space and time all other women, and to some degree their plight. And at the beginning of this hour, you said, I want to tell everyone's story. But it feels like in this book and others going forward, you are strongly focused on the lives of women. And in the last couple months, we've sadly had reason to renovate that kind of understanding with hashtag Stop Asian Hate, and the murders that took place in Atlanta. And I wonder if you can speak about the resurgence of, not the resurgence, but the continued need to speak against violence against women as a writer, and what that means to you as a writer today.
My original impulse was to tell the story of the no-name woman, because the village wanted to obliterate her and to forget her. And I don't know her name to this day. My family wanted to just erase her from existence. And so what I was doing there was to remember her and to bring her back, and to tell her story in as much detail as I could. But my mother, it was an amazing, she was such a good oral storyteller. I mean, she gave me the details on how much the slave cost and how babies were free, and this woman giving birth in the pigsty. And so what all I had to do was to just remember what my mother said, and also to put this one woman into reality. Now everybody knows about her. This has been translated into Chinese too, and it's made its way into the village. And so so she goes from being nothing to, but at least saved in literature. So she's one, and this impulse goes on to, so we're gonna give reality and voice to as many people as we can.
That's a really beautiful and important belief. I want to bring back James Janko, because you know what you're saying right now very much echoes what he does in his own work. And I wonder if James, if you have any follow-up questions for Maxine.
Yeah, as you were talking, Maxine, I had a couple of things came to mind. You were saying you have these nightmares and you write them, and they don't go away, and so I'm wondering, maybe you don't really choose what you write, but what haunts you, points the way. And I'm also thinking like of just the writing process. Your sentences are so beautiful and surprising. And as I was reading The Woman Warrior again, I thought of the sculptor Giacometti, who used to work these marathon hours, and somebody asked him, why don't you do that? Why don't you rest? And he said something like, this is paraphrasing, I need to lose control of my intelligence to make something worth seeing. And it's kind of, that I feel that in your work, you kind of leave what is the habit mind behind so that you're able to find something new. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah, it really does. It really does. It's there's this structure or the ego or whatever it is, but there's also that whole life of dreams and nightmares and vibes or feelings among people. I seem to be losing this ability as I get older, but there was a time when I could meditate upon another person, and then I actually feel that I enter that person, and I could have that person's feelings, and I could know how it feels to go through that life, and so that is like so irrational. It's not part of our regular habits or our educated self, and I do try. You can't even try, but sometimes you just get into that. What do I call it? A mystical state, and and even the mystical state of omniscience. And so then I could see what's going on everywhere. And, back to that story of when we went to Xi'an, and I went into that museum and I saw a whistle that was also a flute that was also an arrow. And what went through my mind was, I made that up, and it appeared. It appeared not only in our time, but it appeared 1,000 years ago, and I caused that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I got to repeat that sentence. I got to repeat that sentence from Chinaman because it's so beautiful, you know, and I've known this by heart like forever. Men, you're talking about how, you know, the union of all things, the unity of things in, you know, converging in one sentence. Men build bridges and streets when there is already an amazing gold electric ring connecting every living being as surely as if we held hands, flippers and paws, feelers and wings. And you know, this is, it's not just beautiful poetry and all. I mean, this is true. This is why you can, you know, you can do that. You can really see how it is to be another person. And I think that's the most exciting thing in writing.
Yes. Yes.
I'm me enough, you know.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, I love that sentence too. And it also, okay, so why do we need to write all these books? We're already connected, but it's a reminder. It's a reminder that we do have connections, and then we can break through this isolation, and we can reach a reader, and the reader can know what we are thinking. And sometimes it's just so wonderful when some of those readers talk back.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, going back to years ago with the Vets Writers Group, you're asking us to look at how writing changes us. And I also like to think about, wow, who would I be without all the great books that I've read? You know, oh, I would be really impoverished. You know, so, you know, it's not something you can really analyze scientifically, but I would be a totally different person with all of those books, you know, that I've read.
So Jimmy, I have a question for you. After you wrote Buffalo Boy and Geronimo, do you feel that you changed?
Yeah, yeah, I really did, because, okay, I got drafted and I wasn't sent to Vietnam to get to know anybody, okay? And so when when I was there, I actually got to know a translator really well. And I got to know this guy Bong, who was a Chu Hoi. He was like, he would go with us in a platoon and he would be our scout, tell us, so don't go there, you know. He didn't speak English hardly at all, but he could point. And, you know, so really I came out of that with very little knowledge of the Vietnamese, you know, just scant knowledge. And so going back there and writing, it was kind of my rebellion. You know, I want to know these people. I really was amazed by them that, you know, they, in the Cu Chi area where I was on Tay Ninh near the Cambodian border, it was just ravaged, you know, carpet bombing, bombed everything, rice paddies, rivers, you name it, defoliation. And they're under all these bombs. Like, who are these people? And so I really felt like when I went back and got to know them, and they're so generous and gracious, it changed me. It just opened my heart, you know. And I really feel like, you know, some of my writing, it has come from angst, but I feel like the best part of it has come from generosity.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
that's really the most important seed.
yeah. Now I have the answer. I think that writing The Woman Warrior changed me in that I came to peace with my mother.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one.
And after I wrote Chinamen, I feel at peace with my father.
Uh-huh.
So it's just one person at a time.
Well, I think we're edging up on 8 billion people. So you have about 8 billion books to write, Maxine.
Well, you can do half of them. Okay?
I'll do my best.
I wish we had another 8 billion hours, because this has been such a wonderfully enlarging and spirit restoring conversation. I wish we had more time. I want to read one more quote from the book and ask you one final question from the audience. You know, in The Woman Warrior, Maxine writes, "My aunt haunts me, her ghost drawn to me, because now, after 50 years of neglect, I alone devote pages of paper to her." And I think what's so powerful about this book is that it gave generosity as a virus to so many other writers and readers to imagine people around them or to write stories. And in this book club, many of our writers were inspired by this book. You know, without it, C. Pam Zhang's novel would not exist. Elaine Castillo's novel would not exist, and we would be impoverished even further. And so it seems this golden ring gives back to itself. But there's one question from the audience from a person named Karen Chow, who has who, speaking of making mystically the thing you want to exist in the world happen by imagining it. She says, Ms. Hong Kingston, what is your advice for young people who are depressed about the state of the world and don't have hope that it will improve? Climate change, class issues, etc. What would you say to them?
I would say that you just let that hopelessness take over and live that hopelessness and that depression and feel it and write down what you are hopeless about. And I think a lot of my writings come from when I am really down, and you express that downness, even though it may look boring, it may look unimportant, it's not dramatic, but just write down those feelings and go with it, and it'll take you somewhere. Just follow that road wherever it goes, and it's something will happen.
Maxine Hong Kingston, thank you so much for this hour, for all your wonderful books, for joining us in this book club. I believe David has a outro message he'd like to pass along to us, but it really was a dream to speak to you. And thank you, James, for joining and for bringing your questions to the hour. It's enriched us all. David?
Thanks, John. That was a fantastic hour, and it was brilliant before the answer to the last question, and the answer to the last question really knocked me off my feet. So thank you. I'm gonna just quickly close us out here. First of all, huge thanks to Maxine and James and John for just a spectacular conversation. This interview has been recorded and will be available at californiabookclub.com for anybody who wants to watch it again. This is just the first event of a really, really vivid fall of CBC. Next month on November 18th, the guest is Tommy Orange for his novel There. And then we'll also have Hector Tobar on December 16th for his novel The Barbarian Nurseries. I want to remind everybody about the sale on Alta membership for California Book Club members. Go to altaonline.com/tote. Please participate in a 2-minute survey that will pop up as soon as we end the event. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all next week. We'll see you all next week. We'll see you all next month. Take care, everybody. And thanks to everyone for participating tonight.